Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff Mom Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works. Today we are talking about one of my favorite things.
Oh my God.
Yes.
So exciting.
Harry Potter.
Harry Potter.
And while, yes, I could just talk about Harry Potter, we're going to look at women and feminism of Harry Potter.
And some added.
Yes, yeah, and bonus Jane Eyre discussion.
Yes, which I love. But I also love Harry Potter, so I don't know why I'm acting so cool about it, because I do. You and I bonded to the fact that I do really love Harry Potter. I just don't go all out and wear the things. Or do fan fiction.
I see your subtle jab, not so subtle jab.
I admire people who love things.
And I love Harry Potter. It was and / still is because my mom, once you like something, it's forever. It's my thing.
Yes.
Every year she gets me Harry Potter stuff.
Oh, no. Every time I think about a present, I'm like, I can't do Harry Potter. I know her mom's going to get her like 15 things, so that's fine. That's covered.
From probably middle of middle school to high school, every year she got me these really ornate Harry Potter snow globes.
Aww.
They're awesome. And I don't know what to do with them because my apartment's really small, but I love them.
If you could tape it to the wall, that would be best for you, wouldn't it?
Snow globe taped to the wall. Nothing could go wrong there.
I will say you are one of the more fun people to buy for because you have a lot of loves that is very tangible.
Yes.
Which is really nice. So thank you for being that person.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I did it all for you.
I know.
So there are a few significant moments in my life that were made by my love of Harry Potter. There are certain trips I took that were for Harry Potter. They were for other things, but Harry Potter was in there. And I am of the generation that aged with it. I graduated high school when the last book came out, and I graduated college when the last movie came out. It was a really big part of my life.
I actually had a really good friend of mine from college who was also loved. She was the reason I started watching Harry Potter because she loved it so much. I actually went to a midnight viewing of Harry Potter and Goblet of Fire.
Yeah.
That's what I think got me into starting to, I actually like this. Let me go back and read what happened. Mm-hmm. And also because I can't wait, I want to know what happens.
Yes.
So I went forward and started reading everything. And I think by the time I got into it, everything was published.
Ooh.
So I was already cool into it, but this was her escape. Like, she had a really, really rough childhood, very empathetic to the point that it hurts her. She's one of those. Mm-hmm. And having Harry Potter as her world, or as a part of who she was, really helped her, I think, survive a bit of the backlash that was her family.
Mm-hmm.
Let me try that again, not the backlash, but the problems that were within her family and her own financial stuff. Harry Potter got her through a lot of that. So I think I love that we're getting to talk about this because that's exactly what she kind of jumps into, which I never thought about. Yeah,
and interestingly, kind of off of that, if you go back in our trauma episodes, probably my most traumatic time was 14 to 15, and that's when Goblet of Fire came out. Mm-hmm. And I just remember taking such refuge in it, even though it was probably the first one that was really difficult.
It was really hard, yeah.
But it just swept you up, and they're essentially mysteries.
It is.
And so you're trying to figure out who did it, what's going on, and it was also for me a way to kind of deal with what I was going through.
Right.
And they continued to be that. I've made friends off of them. It was so powerful. And I did want to give a brief overview. We're not the only people who like Harry Potter. Surprise, surprise. The first book, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, came out in 1997. And the series of 7 books went on to sell millions of copies, 500 million copies, more than that. It's the best-selling series of books of all time. And for people who didn't grow up during this or maybe somehow missed it, it's hard to capture how popular they were. We waited in line at bookstores at midnight.
They had midnight releases of books, which is ridiculously rare.
Yes. And then we would stay up all night and read them. I have pictures of everyone, because I actually didn't get into them until the third one came out. So I have a picture of 4 through 7, me and all my friends. It's 5 a.m. and we're trying to beat each other.
Right. And I love the fact that it's still ongoing. My niece, who is still in high school, I think she's now 9th grade. Ooh, I'm sorry, Grace. I'm sorry, Annie. Whoa. I'm sorry, Addie. There's too many nieces and nephew.
Yes.
I swear to God. They're all A's except for... No, that's not true. Anyway, she has now gotten into it and is completely obsessed and loves everything about Harry Potter. And I love it. It's been so long since the last book was released. All the movies are done. People have kind of gone on, but it's still a big thing in their world, in the world, because it's kind of timeless. Kind of like the Lord of the Rings and all of the trilogy. It kind of continues to be relevant because it's their own world, which is fantastic.
Yeah, my nephew, he's 8 or 9, and he just got into them, and I feel like the coolest person ever.
Right.
Because he visited my old house where I grew up, and it was essentially a shrine to Harry Potter. And it's all been confined into one section now that doesn't really fit with the adult guest room vibe of the rest of the room. But he goes in there, and he's just in love, and we got in like a trivia contest with each other.
That's right.
And just seeing that level of fandom for this book series that, it's been over for a long time. The movie series has been over. And then when we went to the Harry Potter world in Universal, and the wide range of ages and diverse groups of people there, that shows it's really popular and a lot of people connect with it still.
Right.
Yes. The movies were huge box office successes, and the theme park is a huge hit, a huge moneymaker.
Someone will wait in about a 4-hour line to get to the ride.
4 to 5 hours, yes. The last 4 installments of the books set records for fastest-selling books, and the last one sold 11 million copies in 24 hours, the first 24 hours.
Wow.
Yes, and my favorite thing I did with that one is I wrote out my theory before I read it, as you know I like to do.
Yes.
And as I was reading, I updated the theory. And, towards 7 a.m., the theory is perhaps not very good. And it was really funny. I thought the spirit of Dumbledore was trapped inside a wand and was going to come out.
That's intense.
I'm so glad I wrote it down, though. It gives me so much joy.
Yes. Did you include that into your fan fiction, though, since it wasn't in the actual books? You created your own.
I did not include that in my fan fiction. No.
I think you need to redo some things.
You're right. It's unfinished.
Oh
gosh, but I know it's true. It's true. Maybe I could bring Harry back. Also, I forgot about this. The New York Times created a bestseller list specifically for children's literature because the Harry Potter books were taking up all of them, and people were mad. Like, authors were mad about it. So they did that in the year 2000 before Goblet of Fire came out.
Oh, smart.
Yeah. And the value of the franchise is estimated to be around $25 billion, one of the most lucrative franchises of all time.
It's still going.
It is still going.
Fantastic Beasts stuff and the plays.
Yep. Which I did see. I did see it. The popularity of the series it spawned a massive fandom. Essays upon essays, fan fiction, books about all kinds of aspects of Harry Potter. I have a book that my mom gave me that's kind of teaches you how to do divination, read palms, things
I have
like
a crossword search that you gave me that is all Harry Potter, which I love.
That's right. I forgot about that. Tourism, plays, viral YouTube videos, parodies, real-life Quidditch, and podcasts. Which is where we are. So we do have a guest with us today. But before we get in, disclaimer, 1, we were on a time crunch, so we could have talked forever.
Right.
But we had to kind of keep it tight. And then 2, I think I say this in there, I read the books 22 times each when I was young.
Each?
I have a weird thing with numbers. But I've only read them once since then, and it was a couple years ago, but I still feel pretty confident I could win any trivia contest. So far, I have not let myself down in that regard. But I haven't read them since I've become kind of in this show and looking at things from a feminist lens all of the time. I think there's sort of a natural thing that happens when you're a woman and you do that. But I wasn't super analytical is what I'm trying to say. But, all right, let's let our guest introduce herself.
My name is Samantha Goldsman, and I am the co-host of Harry Potter and the Sacred Text and the host of Hot and Bothered. On Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, we treat Harry Potter like it is the sacred text. We say that sacred is an action and not a thing, and it depends on how you interact with the thing. And so we talk to Harry Potter and ask it questions about our own lives and see what it answers back. And then on Hot and Bothered, we do that with romance novels. So reading and writing are ancient sacred practices, and on Harry Potter and Sacred Text, we treat reading as sacred, and on Hot and Bothered, we treat writing as sacred.
And what is the benefit of doing that, of treating it as a sacred text, or how does that help you shape episodes?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of benefits. First of all, it's just incredibly earnest. I think that, we all can get bogged down in cynicism and sarcasm, and this is a place where we bring, genuine love and are unabashed in our nerddom. I'm actually not sure what the, Karen for that would be, nerdery.
Yes.
The other real benefit is community. I feel like we all know this, but millennials and younger are having an absolute epidemic of loneliness with the isolation brought on by technology, leading to higher levels of depression and anxiety. I worked with college students for the last 7 years, and it's really wild to see the increase of acute mental health problems, and it is entirely due to isolation, to social isolation, to feeling as though you're connecting even when you're not. And so treating something as sacred, one of the key tenets is doing so in community. And so we have over 55 Harry Potter and Sacred Text reading groups all over the world. We've one in Latvia that started last week with 17 people. We try to do as many live events as possible. And at the live events, people turn to each other. And Harry Potter is pretty special as far as building community. It is so ubiquitous. You can say Ravenclaw to someone who you don't otherwise speak the same language as, and they'll be like, me too. And so really, we need each other, and Harry Potter is a great way to bring people together who otherwise don't necessarily have a lot in common.
Yes, I totally agree. And as we were discussing before we got started, I am a huge Harry Potter fan. I don't think it's a secret to anyone listening that is true. And I was one of the people that, when the first book came out, I grew up with the characters. I graduated high school when the last book came out. I graduated college when the last movie came out. And it was just a really formative and impactful thing on my whole life. So I was wondering if you could speak to your Harry Potter story and how you got into this specifically.
Yeah, I have a really embarrassing Harry Potter story. I'm a little too old for it. And so I just didn't read it as a kid. And then in my early 20s, I started dating a guy who I ended up being with for 7 years, who's wonderful and a good friend. And on our first date, it came out that I hadn't read Harry Potter and he had read Jane Eyre. And so what we did for our second date was we went to a bookstore, and I bought him Jane Eyre, and he bought me the first 2 Harry Potter books, and we swapped. And Jane Eyre is now one of his favorite books, and Harry Potter is now how I make a living. So I would say it was a successful swap.
Yes.
And it really, the first book I could have read for him, and then the second one I was like, I freaking love this. And yeah, I didn't really turn back. But what did end up happening was I went to divinity school, and I went to divinity school because I had worked in education for 10 years and was getting really despondent over what I just realized that we actually know how to fix our education system, but it is racism that prevents us as a country from fixing our education system. And that to me seems like a soul problem more than a education reform policy issue. And so I went to divinity school thinking that I wanted to understand sort of the heart behind why we hate each other. And then I got about halfway through divinity school and was like, oh, it's really awkward that I'm here because I'm an atheist and I don't really know how to get the most out of this. And every time I try to play with the Bible, I get like really distracted. You know, I'm a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, and so any prayer in temples having to do with like God's benevolence, I'm like, you're like not great at that. And so I asked one of my favorite professors if she would teach me how to pray using Jane Eyre, because I loved Jane Eyre, and so I thought it would be easier. And all that I realized is that, you know, Jane Eyre has the exact same problems that the Bible has and that every book has. It was born out of an imperfect world, and so it is incredibly imperfect. And we developed this idea that, you know, I just talked about this idea. I didn't develop it. We unearthed this idea that something doesn't have to be perfect in order for it to be sacred. Nothing, right? Like nothing is perfect. And so I started running a Jane Eyre as a sacred text reading group. And it was a really beautiful and like hearty group of 4 women who came out every week in the Boston winter. And it was the winter that we got 100 inches of snow in a month. And it was just, the electricity was always going out, and we would still meet. And one week my friend Casper came just to sort of see what I was up to. And at the end, he was like, this is really cool what you're up to, but it would be even cooler if we did it with a book that people actually wanted to read. And I was like, what book do people actually want to read? And he was like, well, Harry Potter. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a really good idea. And we ran a class and 70 people came, and then we started hearing people from all over the world saying, I've heard you're running a Harry Potter secret text class, and I joined. I'd Skype in from New Zealand, and our friend Nat, you know, we were trying to figure out what to do with that because people were sharing really vulnerable things, and we didn't think screens were going to be a good idea. And our friend Nat recommended we make a podcast, and now we have this huge international community of people reading Harry Potter as sacred. That was a very long answer to your question.
I love it.
That's a good answer.
It was great. And that's something I've, on a much smaller scale, experienced when one of my best friends to this day, we met because she had a Harry Potter folder, and it was 7th grade, and I was like, oh, I've got to talk to her. So the header on your site reads, reading fiction doesn't help us escape the world, it helps us live in it. And I think for a lot of people, books, fictional books, and particularly maybe Harry Potter, which is really popular but aimed towards children, even though adults love it as well, it's easy to dismiss. And I was wondering if you could expound on that header, and also what do you think the value of examining these works of fiction through a feminist lens? What do you think that value is?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just talk about my own history with reading books. I was a weird kid, as a lot of us were, and I was like too loud, and everyone called me like bossy, and I was like an assertive girl in the 80s. And then I read the book Caddy Woodlawn, and I felt so seen by the character of Caddy in a way that, and I had a best friend and 2 brothers that I was very close to, but really in a way that I had never felt seen by a person, just because you get to know all of their inner thoughts when you're reading a book. And my mom heard me talk about how much I loved it, and so she read it. And, it was geared toward 3rd graders, so she read it fairly quickly. And there was a scene between a mother and a daughter saying, I know that you think I don't love you because I always tell you to act more ladylike. But basically, I love you so much. My mom boxed the 2 pages and put a star on it. And it just changed my entire sense of self, knowing that my mom also, the mom character resonated with my mom, and Caddy resonated with me. And it gave us a way to talk about things that are really hard to talk about, right? When you're 8 or 9 years old, you don't pull your mom aside and say, I feel like you don't love me because I'm loud. And your mom doesn't pull you aside and say, I know I get mad at you, but I love you more than anything. basically, I just found that we need something to be focusing on outside of ourselves to have difficult conversations, right? You put two people in front of a football game and say something like yell at every minute, they're going to be more likely to have that awkward conversation than if you're just like in a room together having a look into each other's eyes. And we see this just, when I was a chaplain and I was meeting with university students, they would come and see me, and I'd say, "Hi, what brought you to visit today?" And they'd be like, "Oh, I don't know." And so the deal I would always make is I'd say, send me a favorite poem or a favorite essay or whatever, a favorite song, and I will read it, and then let's get back together in a week, and we will just talk about the thing together. And you're 2 minutes into talking about David Foster Wallace short story, and suddenly it's like, well, I'm worried about my dad because, and there's just something so freeing about a text. It means that you're not alone, right? If you get to know the inside of somebody else's thought process, and it resonates with you, it makes you feel like you're part of the world again. So I just think that there's something really special and inspirational, and I think that the more isolated and oppressed and marginalized you are, the more that can be true. A friend of mine who ended up being a chaplain with me over at Harvard, he grew up as like a queer kid in rural North Carolina. And being able to read, Dan Savage really like saved his life on a daily basis. So I think that, and reading James Baldwin, he's a huge James Baldwin fan, and I think reading Giovanni's Room and knowing that he wasn't the only one like that saved him. And so I think that, books, we can be more vulnerable in front of books. They don't judge us.
Yeah, I agree. And you can connect and kind of, it's a way to explore things or ideas that might be scary to you.
Right.
Yeah.
It is. It's nice to be involved in something that you feel like you're a part of it and you're part of a different world that's kind of outside of yourself, which is really nice. And I did want to come back to Anney's question about how do you feel like this came in with like the feminist perspective of Harry Potter. Why was it so important that it came into this role for you as you're journeying and having the conversation about a connection in different type of literature or written text? Where did you come in? And let's talk about feminism. Let's talk about the women of Harry Potter. How did that come about?
So I don't know what inspired me to do it exactly, but at the end of every episode of Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, we bless a character from the chapters. And that was Casper's idea. Casper's a really big fan of blessings. He's a big fan of the poet John O'Donohue, who talks a lot about offering blessings. And so I was all for it. And then I said, but I'm only going to bless women. And Casper was just like, no, okay, then I'll go on her feminism. And it just became, I said I was going to do it for the first book, but now we're in book 6, and I have only blessed women. I had to skip one chapter where I just said I would like to bless all the invisible women because there were no women in it. And it just has become such a rigorous practice of really trying to lift up the women who I might not notice otherwise. I don't think I'd ever really paid attention to Madame Mesmerda or to Padma. But I would get sick of blessing Hermione. I love Hermione, and she deserves all the blessings in the entire world. But just out of sheer boredom of my own voice saying her name, I'd be like, I gotta find another woman in this chapter. And also just the limitation has forced me, to bless women that I never thought I would bless. There's the chapter of Spinner's End, and Bellatrix and Narcissa are the only 2 women in that chapter. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, okay, I got to find a way to open my heart and be compassionate to one of these 2 women. And, I remember the chapter with when we get introduced to Dobby, Petunia is the only woman in that chapter. And so it has forced me to lift up women the way that we know that women are on the outside of of boardroom tables and on the outside of a lot of decisions. It's forced me to pay attention to the women on the outside rather than men in the middle.
Yeah, I before we did this, I made a list of all the female characters, and I was just thinking about, okay, well, how could I look at this one like as through feminism, lens of feminism? And before I came in here, I read so many research papers, mostly about Hermione.
Of course.
And it was very heated. I was kind of surprised at the ongoing debate about her character.
Was one of the things whether she should have been with Harry or Ron?
No.
Oh.
Most of it was actually like out of context. She cried this one time.
Oh.
Yeah.
Can you hear that feedback?
She's perfect. Everyone leave Hermione alone. I mean, she's obviously not perfect. She's actually quite violent and can be horrible, and what she does to Marietta Edgecombe is unforgivable. But she's wonderful.
I agree. Okay, yeah, so Hermione, yeah, she is the source of a lot of debate because she is the primary female character in the books. In my personal take, when I was reading all of this criticism of her, I do feel like they took it out of context and didn't look within the arc of her whole character in all of the books, because she does start out kind of being damsel. She's got a crush on Lockhart. But, like, if I examine one instance from when I was that age, I wasn't, like, a super feminist person.
But she was the one that came to the rescue almost every time, no matter what situation was happening.
Yes. So, yeah, let's talk about Hermione.
You look so... I wish you could see her face right now. She's just grinning from ear to ear and so excited right now.
I mean, my dog's middle name is Hermione, so that's how much I
There it is. I love Harry Potter, too. I don't know if I'm any level of Harry Potter. She definitely wears all the gear.
Yeah.
But I definitely do know all the books and did love everything about it. And I did love also, just to put this in context, that it did grow.
Yeah.
Each book grew with the age of the children, and the darkness and the depth of it grew with all of it, which is very fun. But yeah, let's talk about Hermione.
I think for me, one of the first things I think of Hermione is she's so smart, such a badass. They would have died without her. And the interesting thing there is some people criticize that because she had the higher expectations placed on her. If she hadn't packed the bag in Deathly Hallows, for example, what would they have done? Right. So she was just expected to. And she even complains about that. And that's the interesting thing about her, or one of them, because she is in many ways interesting. But she calls it out. And she calls out multiple kind of gender stereotypes that they're placing on her throughout the series. Which is, it's self-aware in a way, like, yes, this is a problematic thing, but I recognize it's a problematic thing.
Well, I don't think the boys aren't supposed to be, like, super feminist, right? It's exposing a dynamic that I think is absolutely the case. And the characters are supposed to be, from my understanding, even a couple years older than I am. And because I think that, right, like, they were born in 1980.
Yep.
And so, you know, these are, like, very realistic conversations that young people were having, right? Like, why should I do that? Because I'm the girl. And so I think that they are discovering their voices. And I also think that, you know, I think that the thinking about Hermione as a Black character is also really helpful because it would, in some ways, triple justify all of the taxes on her of being Muggle-born in a wizarding world, of being a woman in a man's world, and then being a Black witch in England. I think, of course, she's going to be the most accomplished young woman of her age. I mean, she's brilliant. But of course, she's going to be working harder than anybody else if she has all of that to carry on her. So yeah, and I think the boys are good for her, but I also think that we all sometimes have dumb Ron type boys in our lives, and I don't think she's a problematic character. I think she's a complicated character.
I agree. I definitely didn't read, and I haven't read them again since, a couple of years, but I read them like 20 times when I was a kid. And I never was reading it like she was just the strongest character. Like that's what I took from it. And I always thought she was working hard because she was a Muggle-born and she did have something. She felt like she had something to prove, but also she just really was into it.
She was a nerd.
She's just a type A person.
Right.
Exactly.
Which mimicked their real personalities, apparently. But yeah, she was a nerd, a type A personality who absolutely wanted to make sure she was on point at all times.
Yeah.
Which most successful women or those who identify as females have to be to prove that they can do something, that they have to be 120% sure that they can prove themselves before they speak out loud, which is absolutely reflected with Hermione's character.
And what's so interesting, the fairest comparison to me within the book is Ernie McMillan, who's also like a studier and loves being right about everlasting, and he does not come off super well as a character. He becomes prefect of Hufflepuff. He's the only one who makes it into potions from Hufflepuff in the 6th year. And so as far as the direct comparison to Hermione, we see a boy who is as, obsessed with success. And I think that he's written just as, snivelly as Hermione is. So I don't think that there's, a sexist gendered aspect to that. I think there is sexism within the book, but I don't think that the books are sexist.
Right. I feel like in the book that I had the most problematic issues with the girlfriends, Ron's girlfriend and then Harry's girlfriend. What's her name?
Cho-Chang?
Yeah. In which they are seen as shrill and overly jealous, which, they kind of compete with Hermione almost as a pitted woman against a girl against girl, which was always bothered me the most. I was like, why do they have to all hate each other?
I think that's exactly right, especially Lavender, who is written for a laugh.
Right.
And really, Ron is just terrible to her. Ron is using her to make Hermione jealous, and because he's guilty, he feels ashamed about the fact that he hasn't kissed anybody, and Hermione has kissed Victor Crumb. Mm-hmm. And he just uses her, and then the book mocks her.
Right.
And it's really terrible. Right. And then she dies. I mean, it's really, Lavender got the real short end of the stick.
Agreed.
Luckily, fan fiction, I think, has resurrected Lavender to a large extent, but the books don't do her any favors.
Have you, Anney, included her in your fan fiction, Lavender, at any point?
So I've written a Harry Potter fan fiction. I don't know why Samantha's bringing this up right now.
Because she brought up fan fiction. And you do a really great job with fan fiction, I understand. So
I actually really don't like romance, so Lavender never featured. But maybe I should give her a redemptive arc.
Right.
Her
and Hermione do some kind of adventure together.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe.
My favorite romantic arc written for Lavender is that her and Parvati run away together, because I realize they're not just best friends, but they're in love. But I love a love story. So.
We have some more of our discussion around Harry Potter, but first, we have one quick break for a word from our sponsor. And we're back. Thank you, sponsor. I did want to go back to Hermione, because when it comes to reading about feminism and Harry Potter, what always comes up is spew.
Yeah.
Do you remember spew?
Yeah, spew. It didn't get enough playtime on the movies.
It wasn't in the movies at all.
At all. And I was very sad about that.
It was a very important part of her life.
It really was.
Yeah, so for listeners who don't know, this is the Society for Promotion of Elvish Welfare. Which she starts in Goblet of Fire, the fourth one.
None of the elves except for Dobby want.
Right. Which I do find really interesting. Because you can say that's sort of like intersectional feminism at play.
Right.
It's a lack of intersectional feminism.
Exactly. Right. So I didn't know this, but it was based on one of the first organizations for women in Britain called SPEW, Society for Promoting the Employment of Women.
Oh.
I did not know that till this second.
Wow.
Hey.
Anney, bringing some new facts.
I try. And another thing she does is she starts Dumbledore's army, because something else that comes up a lot is building community to tackle issues. And she is the one often frequently spearheading these things and getting things done. So I feel like she does, in a lot of ways, encompass sort of where we are right now with feminism, which is interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and I think, all we can ask from people is that they learn. And she learns from Spew, right? Like, it goes horribly, and then she does such a better job as the founder of Dumbledore's Army, of, like, really scaffolding it so that everybody feels like they're a part of it, of getting, buy-in early on, of having Harry be the teacher. She does a much better job organizing rather than preaching. And I feel like as far as, like, teenage activism goes, it's pretty great. She's like, by the time she was 15 or 16, she's nailed it. 15.
Yeah.
She's like Greta Thunberg.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. This made me really happy. I wasn't expecting that.
She just clutched her heart.
I did. If I had pearls, they would have been clutched. Sorry.
Hermione Woman of the Year in the Wizarding world.
So since, in the interest of time, I had all these characters written out, but because we're kind of on a time crunch, are there moments or characters that, as far as feminism goes, are your favorite, or things that you really like to dig into or discuss?
Yeah, I think that Ginny has become a really interesting character to be thinking about with the Me Too movement happening. The first 3 times I read the books, I did not read Ginny as, like, an assault victim, which obviously she is, with Tom Riddle's diary. And I just think one of the most beautiful moments in the whole series is when Ginny confronts Harry and says, "I can't believe you didn't come talk to me. It's not like I have been possessed by Voldemort or anything."
Yeah.
And Harry goes, "Oh my God, I'm sorry, I forgot." And she says, "Lucky you."
Yeah.
And that "lucky you" just holds the whole Me Too movement to me of, lucky society that they've gotten to turn away from this. Lucky Harvey Weinstein, with the fact that yesterday we found out he's not going to get any jail time and he's not going to have to pay a dime of his own money. And I think Ginny is just holding up a movement with that "lucky you." And Molly's love for Ginny, she screams Ginny in book 2. It's all caps with an exclamation point. And then obviously there's the "not my daughter, you bitch" moment. And so I think, Molly and Ginny have a real bond that is, to a large extent, obviously they're mother and daughter, but I also think to a large extent is based in trauma, and in Ginny wanting to be out in the world and Molly's really wanting to protect her. And it's just it's a really beautifully wrought description of a situation that I think is all too familiar.
Yeah, that's a good moment. And I also had forgotten that in the 6th one, Ron kind of slut shames her.
Right.
And Ginny's like,
"Oh, yeah.
You're going to call me what? What?
Yeah.
I know.
Oh, my gosh.
It's like, say it. What are you going to call me?
Yeah, do it. I dare you to do it. Because we know she
By the
could
way, I'll
win in a duel.
That head you to hell.
That's right. She will. And I did want to touch on, because I feel like a lot of people forget about Lily Potter.
Oh, yeah. I love Lily.
And her act of sacrifice and love in the beginning is kind of the most powerful thing.
Well, that's kind of her whole character overall with Snape and all that. She is just a compassionate individual who goes for the underdog. Yeah.
And you only have kind of the sanitized version of what Harry knows because he's the narrator. But she does this thing, and that throughout the books is this strong, powerful, kind of defining thing. And I have read a lot of fan fiction where they're like, really she's the one that's powerful, the power not, and people don't credit her.
Right.
or they should.
Right.
Yeah, and we do see some like memories of Snape. That she was willing to stand up to him. We see that memory of Lily and Petunia fighting at, platform 9 3/4, and Lily is trying to get Petunia on board with the fact that she's going to Hogwarts. Right? We see a lot of Lily, and I think she's pretty exceptional. And even if she wasn't, I think the fact that she does, I think that James gets the short end of the stick because James made the same sacrifice.
Yeah.
For both Harry and Lily. But I love that this one act of sacrifice is given so much meaning. Because I think it can. I think one act of sacrifice can change the course of someone's life. And it's really beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, I just remember reading the 7th book and sobbing.
There's so many memories in her face.
I know. We do have a little bit more for you listeners, but first we have one more quick break for a word from our sponsor. And we're back. Thank you, sponsor.
So I did want to come back to, because you talked about Jane Eyre being your favorite book, and I hear a few people talk about that, but I don't hear many people saying that as their favorite. I love Jane Eyre because I love the Bronte sisters, because I also like Wuthering Heights. I know that's way out there as well. But what was it about Jane Eyre that made you connect so heartily in a almost a spiritual level with that book and the character?
It's such a good question. First of all, it's just such a good book. It's just such a good book. So there's that. Obviously, I wrote it for the first time at 14, and I love a love story. So I'm pretty sure the first time I loved the love story. And then it just meets you where you are, When I reread it as I was thinking about going to divinity school, and St. John just became the most interesting character to me, how he tries to manipulate her with religion. Mm-hmm. And then I've really just fallen in love with Bertha. She brings down the whole house with her when she goes. And I just love her for it. I love her for her carnality and that she isn't just going to die. She's going to destroy all she does. And so I just think that it is so complicated and layered. And I guess the other thing I love about it is just how weird it is. There's really some weird mystical fairies and sprites and lightning hitting trees symbolically, and it's just a delightful hot mess. And Wuthering Heights is obviously great because it's that and even weirder.
Right, even more so.
Yeah. I think Jane, I read Wuthering Heights for the first time when I was 15 or 16, and I didn't understand a word. And so now we're doing a Wuthering Heights pilgrimage this June. So I'm in the middle of studying up. It's really interesting having been to Haworth now, where the Bronte parsonage is. Mm-hmm. And that town is really an Emily Bronte town. You go there and talk about Charlotte, and they're like, no, thank you. We love Emily.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we were there for Jane Eyre last year, and they were like, oh, you're here for the wrong book. So, but we're going back this year with Wuthering Heights, and so hopefully we'll get a little more. I
was going to say, you'll get the correct book and a little more welcoming, right. Huh?
Maybe they'll have moved on to Anne by then, but I think that, I'm really excited to spend some time with Wuthering Heights over the next 8 months of really diving into it again. But Jane is just simpler and it's more straightforward, and it's an easier way in than Wuthering Heights.
Jane, I remember it being one of the first books where they had the not so attractive girl being the lead, and the way they described her.
Yep. Oh, absolutely. She, you see yourself. You were invited to see yourself into Jane.
Right.
I like this, a little bonus Jane Eyre discussion.
I remember I was caught up in those times. Jane Austen, Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters, two of my favorites. Mm-hmm. I'm old school that way. Really, really old school, apparently.
You should come on one of our pilgrimages sometime.
We'll be there.
Plan number 50-something trips.
Wait, like anytime people invite us, I hope they're serious. 'Cause we will show up.
Oh, no, I'm totally serious. We should talk about it.
Yes, please. Well,
we have a Bronte and an Austen pilgrimage set up for next
oh my
year.
gosh.
So.
All right. Yeah, we'll be in touch.
We have to go that way. Yes.
Yes.
England, let's go.
And would you like to tell the listeners where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find us wherever you're listening to this podcast right now. You can find Harry Potter and the Sacred Text. Or if you are more of a romance novel person, you can find Hot and Bothered.
And that brings us to the end of this interview. Yes, it was so fun. We could have kept going forever.
And as you heard, we were talking about doing that tour with for Jane Eyre and for all the Bronte stuff and the Jane Austen stuff. But we should have talked about going on the tour for Harry Potter stuff. Can we do that? Is that a thing? Can we do that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, my gosh. You can go visit the studio in London, the making of Harry Potter, and I've been to the theme parks. That thing in London is my favorite thing.
I went to the train station. Stop. I went there when I would visit my friend in London. She took me there. She's like, here it is. And I was like, oh, people waiting in line. I'm not doing that.
Well, to talk about the power of Harry Potter, that's not even, they built that because you can't actually get to the real one. But so many tourists were jumping over trains not jumping over trains, but they were taking
trying to get
risks.
to it, right?
So they built a fake one that tourists can take pictures.
Please just come over here. Stay away from there.
Don't go near the train tracks. It's going to be okay. Really quickly did want to touch on some characters because I know we didn't. There's so many that we could have talked about. A fan favorite is Luna. And one of my favorite things about Luna is the relationship between her and Harry because it's platonic. And I love when she says, he invites her to the slug club, the slug ball.
Right.
And she says, oh, people will think we're friends. And Harry says so earnestly, you are my friend, right? And it's just nice. I feel like we don't get that kind of relationship, even though it didn't have a lot of screen time. We don't see that a lot. He's never judging her for...
Right.
And she's just going to be herself, and that's fine.
Well, I love that Luna and... What's his name? The other one, the one that could have been Harry.
Neville.
I love that Luna and Neville are such good friends in the movie. They do a little more in the movie than they do in the book, but they try to kind of protect each other almost. It was super sweet, super cute.
Yeah.
The oddballs together.
Yeah, speaking of oddball, Tonks. She's a pretty big... I love that she's somehow both really clumsy but really good at her job.
Right.
Because I feel I can connect.
And I think they don't play enough up about her being a part of the Bellatrix and all of their family. Mm-hmm. I think that's important that they kind of scapegoat over.
Yeah.
In the movie, for sure. They kind of barely mention it. And then even in the book, they kind of bypass it to being her in love with Lupin.
Yes. Yeah. And then there's Professor McGonagall.
Of course.
Super tough.
I love her stuff in the last book when she's defending Harry. I love it. Like it doesn't show it in the movie, but I love that scene where she's going up against the twins. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that is a great scene. Did want to touch on Fleur Delacour too, because she's really interesting from where she starts as half Vila.
Right.
And that is all about looks, although people forget they're also extremely dangerous.
Right. Well, that whole school is just all female.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's not mentioned enough, and the strength between themselves. It's kind of like downplayed, I feel like, because it's based on looks and how deceptive they can be or tricksy.
What does Mr. Weasley say? He says something like, "See, boys, this is why you don't go for looks alone." And she is unfortunately the worst competitor, I would say, in the Goblet of Fire.
Who needs the most help, it seems.
Yes, but she did go on to become a pretty central and powerful character. And that's not to say she wasn't powerful then. It's just the way she was
portrayed,
and especially in comparison with all the other champions. she did come out looking like the weakest one. And then villains, we have to talk about Umbridge.
Oh.
Talk about problematic white woman.
Right.
That's the angriest I ever got. I had to Order the Phoenix, the fifth one, after she banned him from Quidditch. Mm-hmm. And I didn't even care about Quidditch. I was just so mad at the injustice of it. Oh, she's infuriating. But I do think having a female villain like that, it just added so much. I mean, clearly, I think a lot of people would say she was their least, like the most hated character.
Right.
And that's a testament to, oh gosh, the writing, but also
the actress.
She did.
She was exactly that character. She encompassed everything and embodied that character to the full.
Yeah.
What's her name? She's a famous English actress.
Imelda Stanton?
Yeah.
And just having that wide cast of here are all these heroes, strong female heroes, but also here are some villains. Bellatrix being one. She is extremely powerful. I think people forget. At one point, she's dueling Luna, Jenny, and Hermione, I think. She's dueling 3 people at once. She was powerful.
She is.
And she's often put in contrast of Lily represents love and pure love, and she represents just ambition and hate. Like they're the opposite sides.
She also loves.
She does. She does. And she was a really frightening character, I found.
Very.
Yeah. And then there's Petunia and Narcissa, who I do find interesting because even if you probably classify them as villains, the mother part of their characters and them going to protect out of their way to protect their children.
Right. Which is very much of a theme through all of it.
Yes.
Whether it's Molly Weasley or Lily, all of them is very protective, very on point. Whether it's bad or good, they're doing something in the name of their children.
Yeah, and that's one thing I know some of the criticism I read of characters like that and Molly Weasley is you're putting them in these gender stereotypes, the mom, and then in response, J.K. Rowling, especially to Molly Weasley, she says the moment when Molly kills Bellatrix, she said she wanted Molly to have her moment to show that because a woman had dedicated herself to her family does not mean that she doesn't have a lot of other talents.
Right.
Yes. And one thing I wanted to close out with, because I do generally try to separate actors from their characters, but Emma Watson is such an interesting case because I remember being 10 years old, feeling extremely jealous that she had been cast. And she said in an interview, I remember this perfectly. I didn't have to look it up. She said, when asked about Hermione, she said, I hate her, I hate her, I hate her. Because she was into fashion and she thought Hermione just wasn't cool. But then she went on, as she grew up, as Emma Watson grew up, she grew to love Hermione and loved all those things about her, that she was a warrior and she was smart. And I feel like a lot of us go through that where we hate the thing.
Adolescence.
Yes.
We are awkward children and we hate everything about ourselves.
Yes. And then now she's a feminist activist and she's the voice of UN's He for She. She was appointed as the UN Women Goodwill Ambassador in July 2014.
She started a book club.
She did. She got good recommendations on there
just
too.
Saying.
But a Google search of is Emma Watson too pretty to play Hermione turns up almost 500,000 results.
Right.
You would never, ever see that with any of the male actors. Is Daniel Radcliffe too handsome to play Harry Potter? That would not happen.
No, but I think they did question his height.
They did. That's a separate episode.
Yeah.
They also questioned his eyebrows. They said they were too feminine. Look, we're unpacking a thing at the very end that we should come back to
so
later.
Many things.
Yeah, so clearly we blew through those. I could talk about this forever, but we'll have to end it here today. Definitely go check out Vanessa's podcast. Go find her on the social medias.
Women. Oh no, it's Harry Potter and Sacred Text and Hot and Bothered, which I just love that.
Yes, and if you would like to reach us, you can. Our email is stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Instagram at Stuff Mom Never Told You or on Twitter at MomStuffPodcast. Thanks as always to our super producer, Andrew Howard.
Oh, thanks, Andrew.
Thanks to our guest, Vanessa and Hannah, for helping to set it up. And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Mom Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio's How Stuff Works. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.